Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Our art salon is with members of the Northwest Mosaic Artists Alliance. These are a few of the several more artists who are part of the current exhibition at Northwind Art Center here in Port Townsend. And so to start, we'll just kind of go around through the panel, have everyone introduce themselves and their involvement with the show, and we'll take it from there. Before we do that, if you're joining, we're going to have everyone hide their camera. So I'll be hiding your video so that it's just the panel featured in the recording for tonight. And so, Kelley, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Kelley Knickerbocker, and I am a self-taught mosaic artist. I'm a professional for the past 15 years doing this discipline. And these are this group of Northwest mosaic artists is friends. We've been friends and colleagues for about 10, 15 years. And one day we were standing in an exhibition and thinking, hey, we should figure out how to do this. We should figure out how to start showing together. And so we just decided to pool our efforts, and we began pitching shows to different galleries. And there are 10 of us in total, and just 5 represented here, 9 represented at the Northwind Gallery. And we are so happy to be there in Port Townsend. It's a lovely gallery and just a lovely, lovely show. It was a delight to put together. So that's who we are.
Wonderful. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Richard Davis, and I started making mosaics about 22 years ago in New Zealand. And in 2003, my wife gave me a membership to the Society of American Mosaic Artists for a Christmas present. So I went to my first mosaic conference in 2004 in San Francisco. And I'd like to say I met my community there. So from that point on, I have been addicted to mosaics in every form that you could possibly imagine. Besides making mosaics, I also have a guide to mosaics in Paris that you can see publicly on my website that describes how to find 250 different public mosaics in Paris. So I like both the history and making of mosaics.
Lynn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Lynn Adamo. I am a mosaic artist. I've been working with mosaics for over 20 years. My first career was as graphic designer, and I came to mosaics just by accident, kind of, about way back in 1996. And like Richard, well, let's see, I discovered the Society of American Mosaic Artists when they were very new, like in about the year 2000. Followed along and thought, yep, this is what I want to do. And I also went to my first conference in 2004 in San Francisco. I didn't meet Richard that year, but I met him the next year. And then I met Kelley next year, Jennifer, and we have been colleagues growing together. Like Kelley mentioned, primarily all of us began as self-taught mosaic artists and then have workshops and studied along the way. So yes, I'm very happy to be a part of this group as well.
Lovely. Jennifer?
Jennifer Kuhns. I live down in Grace Harbor County, a very, very rural area, kind of southwest of Olympia. And if you know Washington. And in my case, I came to Mosaic from having been, I considered myself a recycled artist. I was kind of doing things with all different kinds of mediums. And I discovered Mosaic because I was trying to cover an ugly repair in a rental house. And I used broken tile. And so I came at it definitely from sort of the installation perspective. This is something that's really functional and useful. And started trying to develop those skills. And I think I met Kelley first. There was a Yahoo group back then where we were trying to brainstorm and understand how this medium works. And I had my first SAMA conference in 2009, and again, we all met each other and really liked each other. I think that's another component of this, is that we started hanging out socially outside of Mosaic, but just really enjoyed each other's company and decided to start showing together.
I guess that leaves me, right? And my video keeps switching off. I'm not quite sure why, so I apologize for the technical problems, but I'll just keep talking. I've been probably a Mosaic artist for a little bit shorter time than everybody else. I started about 10 years ago. My academic background is, I have a degree in Chinese art history, but as a writer, and has been as a writer. And about 10 years ago, I really felt looking for something creative to that wasn't in the word part of my brain. And I was always kind of drawn to mosaics without, it was just one of those things you're drawn to. You couldn't really explain why. And in my neighborhood, which is also Kelley's neighborhood, there's a studio where you can do mosaic, which I stumbled upon right at that time. And so I just kind of started going there all the time, and it really clicked. And then I took a class with Kelley, and we really clicked, and eventually became studio mates, which we've been now for 8 years. And eventually I got competent enough that they asked me to join the group, which was very, and so yeah, I've been very committed to doing this for about the last 10 years.
Oh, wonderful. And so maybe some of you could speak to what you find particularly enjoyable or particularly challenging about working in this.
Well, enjoyable, everything. Challenging, everything. There are several of us who teach, as well as do have a studio practice. There are many tracks you can choose. Of course, in our artistic career, we choose basically anything that keeps money coming in and the lights on. So many of us teach, and we do public art, and we do community projects, and whatever comes along, and it's challenging being a small sole proprietor and making a living in art and trying to manage all of those aspects that go along with that. I teach a lot. I teach all over the world, mosaic theory and technique, and it's kind of my bread and butter. And then in my studio, between teaching gigs, I do whatever I want. And if somebody buys it, yay, that's awesome. But I get to do a lot of spec work and just explore ideas so managing the scheduling, managing all of that, and then COVID and the teaching thing is not as easy now because of COVID and having to pivot and do that all in a different way. And so several of us are struggling with that and working with that and winning, I think, continuing on. But this particular, I think all of us are drawn to the physicality of this medium, the dimensionality, the physicality, the breaking down materials. We use hammers and nippers and chisels, and we use mud, we use cement adhesives and that sort of thing. So it's very tactile. It's very, we are building, we are construction artists. And I think that is attractive and, a huge part of this for all of us, because the materials are so varied and so challenging in their own way to procure and process and join. And so that's one of the joys and the challenges, and making art that's really heavy and hard for Northwind to hang in the gallery. That's always a challenge too. So that's, go on, everyone.
Okay.
I could say for myself that I come to Mosaic from sort of a melding of it being a fine craft, an art, and a trade. I'm also a contractor, and I do a lot of installation work, and I do some teaching, but mostly my bread and butter is the installations and public art. And what I love is that it's an art form that you can put on an exterior wall, and it's never going to fade. It's really easy to clean. It's durable, it's touchable. So it's very functional, and in that tactile quality. And I think I'd say the other thing about it in a more philosophical way that's really gratifying is how you're taking chopped up and broken things and you're assembling them back into something whole and beautiful. And there's just, it's very cathartic. So especially like times like we're experiencing now, I know that for me, it's saving my life right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, I'd sort of echo some of that. I think what I find both challenging and really engaging and lovely about it is the sort of, we're working with hard materials, and it's sort of like the quest to create grace and flow, working with hard materials to make things that are that are unbending look like they're bending, and to make things that don't flow look like they flow like water. And to make things that are hard look like light and all that. I just find that really endlessly like an endless wonderful thing to explore.
Yeah.
For me, also the attraction of the physicality and the materials and building something with your hands really attracted me, because I spent 25 years being a graphic designer and I was mainly behind a computer. I was doing creative work, but it was, guided by clients, and it was not physical. And so when I found Mosaic, I'm like, oh my God, this is wonderful. And so I was able to transfer my design skills into a different place. And then I kind of found working with public art and students and kids in schools was really gratifying. And then it's kind of funny because I was really interested and excited to do this heavy work and the physical nature of installing exterior installations. However, I'm like starting it at midlife. And then so I'm kind of like, one of the challenges is, how do I keep doing this work that I do love, but as you maybe become a little physically less capable. So that's an interesting challenge, but it's still, I thought I was going to be retired from doing public work and commissions that pay money, but yet stuff happens. You never know. A job will come to you and you think that is wonderful. So the material and the design and the history of it's never going to get tired. I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get tired of it.
Okay, it's my turn. I'm going to share a screen, I hope.
You're getting
Did
good.
that work?
Nope.
Not yet.
Must not have been Richard easy.
Oh, host has disabled attendee screen sharing. Not me.
Oh. Well, Richard, do you think you could share verbally what you wanted to?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful.
For me, the joy of mosaics is partially in the collecting of the materials. I walk the beaches where I live and pick up pebbles, not every day, but a lot. And my wife says, what are you going to do with those hundreds of buckets of pebbles that you have? But slowly I work through them. And I also haunt salvage stores where I pick up the type of tile I like to use these days, which is unglazed porcelain. And for me, the challenge is, as Todd said, using those materials so they flow, even though I can't cut a pebble to make it fit. I have to pick within hundreds of them in order to make it work. And when you use recycled materials, there's a lot of things that you have to do to prepare before you can even put them into a mosaic. We might need to wash them. We might need to cut plastic off the back or whatever. So that's both the joy and the hardship of using found things like I do for the most part. And for me, once I get into the studio, it's forgetting about everything that's outside the studio and just having fun there without worrying about anything else.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things that that I think that brings us all delight and meaning in this particular medium is that we are using materials and tools that have been used for thousands of years to make this form of art. And so to be using the hammer, the martellina, and the hardy, and cutting stone and glass and you know, we're really connected. We're really connected, and yet with a fresh, you know, we don't have a tradition or a history in America of mosaic. So like in Europe, it's a trade. It's, you know, it's an accepted trade, and you can apprentice from early in your childhood. And here, for the most part, we come in through the back door, Americans, you know, with just breaking things and putting them back together, and anyone can do it. It's accessible to anyone. And that is the introduction, you know, for Americans, that's usually the introduction to mosaic, is as this very humble, very accessible craft. And so we get sort of both of those worlds. We get the to not be trapped by the history that's, you know, steeped in the you know, the tradition of the European mosaic artists, and yet we have to do a lot of learning. We have to do a lot of seeking out the traditional skills and training, and figuring out how to use those materials and use those tools and find out the rules that they went by in traditional mosaic, so that we can understand, you know, bring it all together, bring it up, bring our innovation and our that freshness, but understand the history and the rules and andamento, the flow in mosaic, and put it all together, try to put it all together in our own unique way, and take it into a new thing. And it's only been in the last 100 years or so that mosaic, even in Europe, has been an actual modern art form. It was always just durable painting and sort of an expression. It was artisans who made it, not artists who were interpreting their own original ideas. It was artisans interpreting, you know, painters' ideas. And so it's only been in the last 100 years or so that that contemporary artists are in Europe, have turned this sort of, it's been very wow over there to have them bring it out of the traditional trade sort of thing, and bring it into a modern art form. And it's amazing. It's amazing things are happening over there. And some of us have studied with those folks who are making that happen. And so trying to put all that together and understand the history of it, and yet keep it fresh, take it forward, you know, make it modern contemporary art. And we fight a little bit the view here in America that it's just a craft, and it's, you know, it's primitive, and it's absolutely quite not. It's quite refined. It can be quite refined and quite dramatically a modern contemporary art form. Blah 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 blah.
Thank you, Kelley. Would any of the others like to speak to where they see their work fitting into this kind of worldwide movement toward, you know, mosaic as a real contemporary art form, as opposed to decorative craft or ancient art form? I'd love to hear.
I have one thought, and it speaks to the traditional of using hard materials, and Todd and you're speaking about making a hard material mold and to look soft and look flowing. And I really am enjoying exploring combining soft and hard materials, totally non-traditional material like fiber and things that are malleable, and they aren't permanent either, because and you're able to do that if you're making just a fine art piece of art that goes on the wall inside of a house. You don't need to make it be permanent and lasting. So I'm having fun exploring, playing with materials that aren't necessarily traditional, and that helps. I think that is a contemporary application, but yet I still highly respect the traditional classical andamento, and I follow those rules, and I integrate them in the modern work. And I've been enjoying watching other artists around the world do the same thing. I think that's really exciting.
Well, these days I tend not to make any mosaic that could be construed as I don't know, a decorative mosaic. So I don't make bird baths or planters or platters or things like that. I have in the past. And I've also done what I guess is called decorative mosaics, where I tile a wall or a floor. But unlike older European and Roman mosaics, I tend not to use borders around my mosaics that are repeating. So in a way, I am disobeying the old rules about you need to have this border with this repeating motif all the way around, and then you put a wonderful detailed emblem in the middle. I tend to leave all that behind. So in a way, that's how my mosaics are not so decorative and fit, or trades like, and fit more into the art category. So basically I make paintings that hang on hooks, or I make sculptures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the tradition as a language that we work with, and it's like andamento, which is the flow of the materials. That's all the language we use, and it's an ancient language. But the questions we're asking and trying to answer are all modern questions, and we're looking for modern answers. And so how can we use that vocabulary to express contemporary ideas, or to explore the things that are interesting or important to us? And so I think fundamentally that makes it different from what came before, even though we're still working within the same traditional vocabulary in some ways. And then the vocabulary, like language, changes over time. People use language in different ways, and so what we're doing with this is what people have always done with art, or music, or poetry, or anything else. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to explore, and something that's modern in general, is is sort of to explore, it's like tension and release, to sort of how do you find chaos and order. We live in a world that's filled with both chaos and order, and how do you, in our art, how something I struggle with, but how to take the order of the traditional language and to create disorder and then return to order, and what that all means. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm materials are my jam, and so in Mosaic, the traditional materials of expression are stone and glass, because that's what they had back in the day, right? So durable and available. And so that's kind of the holy, that's the holy tradition is those hard materials, and it's a very dense medium, right? It's a very tight, and because it was a skin on walls and floors, and so traditionally it's a tight, dense, and durable medium. And one of the great joys, and I think for me, one of the great joys and challenges and responsibilities I feel to this medium is to expand, is to push that definition of dense and durable, and play with it, push it to express, to bring different materials in, spaces between, vast areas of space, contrasts between that density and space, and transient materials. Like I've worked a lot with paper and stone together, paper and stone and ceramic and glass, and wood, and materials that are transient, ephemeral, right up next to, packed in with these durable materials, and the idea of space, and the idea of the mortar, the substrate, and the tesserae, or the pieces, having equal value in the mosaic, whereas historically the tesserae, the pieces, are the jazz, right? Those are the big, yay, those are the glory bits. But to have all three of those things be of equal value, and then manipulate, play like music with those three together, like colored mortars, space, artwork on the substrate that the mosaic doesn't all the way cover, and a lot of different ways to push and express. And like as Todd was saying, ask and answer, modern and eternal questions, with this, things that are going on right now, processing the world status and the pandemic and everything, with more variety and more push outward, from just the dense and the durable. I could go on.
Would any of you like to speak to themes that you're currently exploring in your work, in your studios, whether it's been shown or not?
Anybody? I'll jump in if no one else wants to,
Please.
but I've done plenty of talking. So anybody else? One of the things I've been exploring for a couple of years and continue to do is, and a number of the pieces, I think all the pieces that I have in the show are evidence of this, is the use of rust. My favorite material these days is rust, and almost all the rust in my mosaics comes from, or actually comes from around, I live in Seattle, but it comes from around Port Townsend. There's lots of nice rusty stuff washes up on the beaches around Port Townsend. And I find rust really appealing for a lot of different reasons. The texture, the beautiful color of it, the sort of transformational nature of it, the fact that it comes from something that people built that's collapsed or decayed, and so it tells a story there that one can only guess at. And then the idea of using this material to make something new that tells a different story just feels it has a lot of layers. But I use it in a very traditional way, because traditional Roman mosaics or traditional Byzantine mosaics tend to be about a subject, which then gets surrounded by, it's a portrait of a king and a queen, or of the food that the emperor ate or whatever, and that's like the central thing. Or there are mosaics of saints on the walls of churches, and so I don't do saints, but I do, but I treat these pieces of rust as if they're the subject, and then surround them with material in a somewhat traditional way, but my own sort of my own use of the vocabulary of line and flow and andamento, and that's something that I find endlessly. It's something that everything I make, I discover something new to explore in the next piece. And so I tend to work in series because it gives me the opportunity to notice something and explore it in the next one. And that kind of, so far that feels like it could go on forever.
Todd and I share a similar affinity and sensibility for rust. I'm just, the pieces that you find that are washed up by the coast are amazing to me. I live in the high desert of Central Oregon, and so I don't have water near me, but I do have large junkyards and scrap yards of hard metal materials that also have been rusted and discarded. And so I've been really enjoying, just going through the scrapyard and finding things that I can do a similar thing that Scott's doing, but it's a little bit different. And I've been having this meandering long series that as things come to me, I sit there and think about them for some time, and then they tell me what they want to be in a mosaic, what that they want to go along with stone and glass and possibly other little rusty things. And so some of the pieces in the show in Port Townsend also have those elements in them. And yeah, I'm doing some more things, similar thing where a friend found, rusty perforated pipe on her property, and they were all bent up, twisted. And I'm like, yeah, I can do something with that. And so a new piece is going to incorporate those and also some other things. So just being able to salvage things that are really garbage and then make them into something new and beautiful, fresh, give them a new life. It's pretty satisfying.
Well, for me, my favorite medium at the moment is unglazed porcelain tile. And one reason that I like it is that it limits my color palette. If I was to use glass mosaic pieces from Italy or Mexico, I would have to choose from amongst up to 2,000 different shades of glass to make something. And I find that very difficult. So I like being limited by what I can find only in unglazed porcelain, which is a very limited palette. Putting in the color red into porcelain is highly expensive. and it makes certain colors in the red, yellow, and orange shades cost more than gold if you bought it in glass, which is very strange, but that's a chemical process that I don't understand much about. And the other reason I like using unglazed porcelain is it breaks a mosaic rule where you shouldn't have a triangle in each piece should not have a triangle tip, but porcelain is very brittle, and when you cut it, it tends to snap into a triangle. So I don't mind breaking that rule at all, and somehow I appear to have made it work for me.
Nice. In my work over the last couple of years, I've been exploring sort of different ways of disruption and movement through disruptive movement through order. And so just exploring that in different ways, disruption and the whole sort of chaos and order, alignment and disarray, and the necessity of both of those, and the necessity of that contrast for both, that they don't exist without one another, and figuring out different ways of making, mosaic can be, as you can see, like behind me in my background, there's a certain order to the tesserae, and so it's fascinating to me to disrupt either physically by having things move up out of the work, or just by creating movement that is disruptive through that order. And so that's been, over the last couple of years, that's been something that I've been coming back to over and over, and also as a way to process the disruption of current affairs. And art is life, life is art. There's no separation from that. And we're always working through, now I will just speak for myself, I'm always working through trying to figure out an answer, to create an expression or an answer or a solace for, whatever is happening in my current world.
I feel like I was reluctant to speak up because I'm smack dab in the middle of a really big commission project, so I haven't had time to really think about what am I focused on in the studio right now. I'm just focused on getting this project done that's about water, and it's really simple, and most of my themes I think are more mundane, more simple, and more about just a celebration of nature a lot of the time, nature, the things around me, my own life. And then sometimes when I am doing, especially my more photorealistic style of work, some of the portraiture and that style is to drawing attention to, here's something to think about. Maybe present it in a way that isn't really in your face, but brings that topic to the forefront, and then lets the viewer draw conclusions about it.
And portraiture, you've been moving into portraiture over the last couple of years, strongly into really expressive, beautifully expressive portraiture.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the portraits that I'm making, when I'm really making, sometimes I'm really just practicing how can I make these hills and valleys and light and shadow in a face and bring this expression to bear with using this hard material. Sometimes it's just that challenge that I'm trying to meet, and then there are also some like the Breonna Taylor piece where it's more there's that challenge, but it's also saying, hey, look at this. Here's just something to think about, without putting what I think about it into it in a really overt way, just asking people to think about this. So I have a number of artworks in the last few years that are kind of that. Sometimes it's a historical figure that's just an underrepresented historical figure. Why haven't we heard about this person? And sometimes I do incorporate some imagery Again, in the show, we've got the Alice Paul piece, and in the background of that piece, I have a collage that's about the suffragette movement. So that sort of thing is drawing attention.
I appreciate your the way you bring attention in a subtle way, and that there it is. There's a lot to it, like all the things behind the actual portrait that invite the viewer to say, to look deeper or not, you know, just appreciate the beauty of it and walk on, or go, wait a second, what's going on here? And I think that's a really powerful.
Yeah, that's my goal, is to just ask that viewer to question this, you know, look at it more closely, really investigate this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Could some of you speak to the work that you currently have on exhibit at Northwind in this show, and maybe even for your co-exhibitors, your colleagues in the Alliance who are not here tonight, maybe you could also speak to some of the work that that they're exhibiting alongside you.
Some of them are here.
Oh, watch it.
That's right.
Yeah.
They
So we
are.
need to be careful what we say. Is that correct?
We'll talk about your own work then, if that's more.
Well, I will talk about. I will say a few words about Mark Brody's work in the gallery. I'm always struck by Mark's work when I see it in person, especially when it's with the rest of our work. I'm always struck by the joyfulness of his work and the buoyancy of his work, and literally so in the pieces he has in the show, because one of them is from the perspective of being lifted up above a scene on the ground, and then there's an aerial view, and then there's also a piece that's like you're laying on the ground and you're looking up through the trees at the sky. And I'm just reminded with his use of color and his use of non-traditional shaping of tesserae, of very free form, very joyful, unregulated tesserae, and just the color. It's so joyful and so positive, and it's a lot like Mark also. And I'll talk about one piece that I have in the show called Lost Gradient, and it's the big one, the 4 foot by 4 foot. And it was a piece I did a little while back, and I'm really drawn to an elemental palette and not leaning a lot personally on color, but finding the richness in the grayscale palette and just a very little color, if any. And that particular piece is about loss, and it's about at first it was about loss and grief and then it became about the space that is left, the space that loss creates, and what we do with that space, and the potential that space has for many things: pain, beauty, learning, freedom, expansion, breath. So that piece is about, there's a lot of missing space, and you notice in the piece itself, a lot of it is space. And so it sort of speaks to that, the vacancy, but the potential of the beauty and the vacancy held in spirals of other things. So vacancy is balanced by activity and cradling, and so there you go.
Well, I have a piece in the show called Wave, which is made with glass multi and something called dalle de verre, which is an inch thick piece of glass that is often used in churches to make stained glass windows, but they're not stained glass, they're made with dalle de verre, so the window is 1 inch thick glass held in cement. And I used to boogie board for most of my life, and I'm physically unable to do that anymore, but I still see a wave and I want to be on it and in it. and see it come over my head. And so I thought it would be fun to try to make a wave where I'm inside of it. I can look up and see the sunlight shining through the thinner part of the wave as it comes over my head, and I wipe out. But so I use Dal de Verre, which is, I find, extremely difficult material to use. Just in terms of setting it into a mosaic, there are a lot of technical issues, and I combined it with glass multi, again, because I use recycled materials. A lot of it is recycled glass multi, or glass, vitreous glass, a lot of different things like that together. And I enjoyed the challenge of making that mosaic. It probably took me 4 months, I'm guessing, including where I had to break off part of it, throw it away, and start over.
I'll jump in. I'll talk briefly about the work by an artist who I don't, one of the artists in the show who I don't believe is here at the moment, but Karen Rychek, and I find her work interesting because it's everything about what she does is really comes from a different place than my work, so it's quite fascinating to me. But she does it's much less in the sort of the tradition that starts with Roman mosaics and runs through Byzantine church mosaics, and it's more her stuff is a really interesting combination of both representational and abstract, and uses larger pieces, often that are cut with a saw. It's sort of there's a I'm now blanking on the kind of stone or woodwork that you do with large pieces. Pardon?
Slate.
No, and it'll come to me, but it's but anyway, she does a series. There are a couple of them in the show that are they're sort of like they're like crop circles from taken flight, like from an airplane, and they're really evocative and masterful, and they're I can't really even imagine either technically or conceptually how to do them, but I just find them really compelling. And so I'll just talk about one piece of mine, which I finished about 48 hours or less before I delivered it to the gallery. But it's mostly slate and rust, and it's a kind of it's all the things that I've talked about that I've been exploring for years. But it was a particularly fun, engaging opportunity to try to try to create flow. I really wanted to figure out how to make slate look like it flowed like water, and it ends up like Kelley and I have there's some similarities in what we do, maybe because we work side by side. But I'm also I do stuff with more color, but much of my work is relatively monochromatic, and I'm interested in working in a very narrow palette, but working in gradients from dark to light and light to dark. And so this does that. And I've also been trying to work in more negative space, where which Kelley does in a much more dramatic way in the piece she was talking about, but to have the hard material disappear and to interrupt the line and the flow and what the absence of material says at a subconscious level, and what it does to the material that's there. And I've been in all of the pieces where I've done this, the material in the piece I'm talking about, the lines are vertical, but the lost space is horizontal. And in some earlier some works I finished earlier, where I was exploring the same idea that are in the show, the line that happens, the lines are horizontal and the negative space is vertical. And that was kind of an accident, but it's kind of cool. So that's something I'll keep exploring for a while.
So I'll say something about Scott Fitzwater's work. Scott and I did a residency together in 2019 in Ireland. And so we got to work in the studio together day by day, for about 30 days in a row. And it's fascinating to watch his process, because as you can see from the work he has in Northwind, he works primarily with slate. And then some obsidian now, some more glass, but a lot of his work has been done in slate, which is roof tiles, and he slices them and then splits those slices and then makes these tiny little pieces of stone. And so the order and chaos thing is beautifully done in his work. And such a beautiful explorations of this particular material over and over and over, and how many iterations. And he's got an engineer's mind. And so he's constantly figuring out how else to express with the cutting this material and getting a really 3D take on it. Some of his pieces are really, come out and get you, and some of them are much more gentle. He's working more with some color now and coloring his mortar. And some of the pieces in Northwind are, they use an ochre sort of mortar and a baby blue kind of mortar, and are sort of expressing that way. But I'm always just drawn to his command of the straight piece and making it flow, because he doesn't shape a lot of pieces. They're just like sticks of slate, and either up on end or side by side, and a number of patterns and expressive flow that he can get out of the straight piece just blows my mind. And it's always a pleasure to see so much of his work in one place, because to go from one to the next and to sort of explore and figure out his use of space along with those sticks, just really lovely, really masterful, and a joy to just sort of wander around in the mazes that are his pieces. Just really fun.
The one person we haven't talked about, I think, one person who's missing is Joanne Dashel, in Lincoln City, Oregon. So she lives on the coast, and I am a little nervous about talking about her work, but I know Joanne really well, and I've visited her a number of times, and we have a common connection with the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology down there. And I know that she's very ecology minded, thinks a lot about the environment, and that's a huge concern for her. And that kind of comes out in her work. There's a lot of representational work, and it's pretty much most of the time the focus has to do with her experience of her world, the local world, the flora and fauna, her garden, and really a celebration of all those things, the plants, the animals. And my favorite new piece of hers is the one of the sardines in the net. It's really incredible. And it's the sardines are made of gold smalties, so they shimmer the way sardines do. And then the net is all made of negative space, which just is brilliant the way it comes together. So it's a really sort of a two-tone. It's more subtle than some of her work, where she tends to do fruits and vegetables that are more colorful. But that gold smalty is just stunning in the fish.
And that piece has so much rhythm and so much life to it. It's like the rhythm of it is just amazing. Yeah, it's a really great piece.
I like it a lot.
Oh my gosh. And when I first saw it, I really didn't know from the photographs that the sardines, she actually created a level in the substrate. They're actually dimensional, and that just blew me away. So shout out to Joanne for that amazing work. I just wish everybody could see it in person. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the dimensionality of this medium is it's just so it's such a delight to explore and to emphasize, and of course we can go overboard. That's the editing is crucial. But it is so exciting to be able to go out from the board and go even into the board, through the board, out of the board, to really push those boundaries. That's one of the wonderful things about the immediacy and physicality of Mosaic.
Yeah, the texture and the chance to undulate in space, which is somewhat unique to the medium, is one of the great pleasures of it.
One thing that is kind of funny is that this is actually how we talk when we hang out. it, it really it's a unique art form. It has its own language, and it really draws people together who work in it. I think that's part of the reason we've bonded the way we have, is that we can speak this language that you can't talk like this around. But your spouse is going to really get sick of hearing about ondimento and tesserae and interstices, and so I don't know if it comes across, but this is kind of the language we all speak. And it's really fun. It's really fun to get together and find a group of people who gets as excited about the same kind of weird oddball topic.
And the other thing about working as a group, about being colleagues and being, connected, even loosely as we are, and getting together and talking about things, is that I'm just continually fascinated and in such have such admiration and respect for and amazement by how the different brains work, how our minds work, how we're interpreting, how we are sussing out and pulling out aspects of life, how we're working through issues in Mosaic, technical issues, but working through, as we know each other over the years, we're going through issues in families and relationships and, geography and, health, all kinds of things. And seeing the way, this group of people works through those things, channels them into understanding of art and of expression, and like I was going to say about Karen Rychek's work as well, that I'm just on a regular basis, she'll come out with something that I just am amazed at, like, her brain, right? Like the different, how we process and how we accept and don't accept and challenge and translate and express and interpret is an endlessly fascinating thing, and there's osmosis going on all the time, but watching one another and being in this group where we can experience those things together and watch how we all do that is fascinating.
It's much better than taking a class. Because I see people doing things in this little group that, wow, how'd they do that? How'd you do that? And then I think, well, maybe I can do that too and make it work for myself. Yeah. So that's one of the fun things about this group, is just learning from each other. Yeah.
The support and the camaraderie are amazing. And especially in this time of COVID, there's certain things that we all have come together and sharing, more than just like going, yeah, we're going to put this show on, that we're forced to do this through Zoom. If COVID hadn't happened, we as a group would not have been doing this. Visiting each other on a semi-regular basis, more often.
Via Zoom.
Yeah, more often than the in-person things. Mostly we might see each other in a large group once a year. So it's interesting. Anyway, the camaraderie and the supports.
Yeah. And the exchange of ideas, the exchange of ideas and development of ideas and extension of ideas and all of that all the time.
And the generosity too, right? We're not competing with each other. Yeah. It's partly maybe because partly because maybe it's an undervalued art form, and so there's not like the rest of the art world's not clamoring after us as maybe as much as they might be. Maybe you, Richard, but we're not competitive with each other, or if we are, it's only to be as to aspire to be as excellent as the other people in the group, not to I don't know. It's all very positive and very generous, and it's really great.
And speaking of the sort of the group dynamic, it's also really lovely to see, like at Northwind, to see our works, to see the works of 9 people who work in the same medium, but very differently, to see someone's, like in this case, Jay's vision of how all of our work speaks together, the conversation that can be had with our work when it's all in the same room, because normally we're off in our own studios in different parts of Oregon and Washington, doing our own thing. And so when all this work comes together and we just like throw it all into the gallery and say, go, Jay, and he does this amazing thing. When I walked into that show for the first time and saw how he had brought together into conversation in different ways our artworks, it was like, wow. So we find things, we see things in this medium, in our own work, in each other's work, that we wouldn't see when it's all separate and, away in our own studios. So that it's really lovely to have these opportunities, and thank you, Northwind, for accepting our pitch and, setting up the show, because Jay made a beautiful conversation out of our works. And that was just really powerful to see.
Another thing about Mosaic artists is we also have a very large international community that we are a part of. And you may not know this, but already in France and in Japan, people are looking at this show because I sent them links to all the pieces in the show. And so we love to see other people's mosaics and learn from them and enjoy them.
I've seen names in these boxes of names I recognize.
Friends, colleagues.
Yeah. Great.
Lovely. Well, thank you all for coming out or staying in tonight, enjoying this conversation. It's been very beautiful to hear from all of you. And thanks to everyone who joined in the audience. I hope you had a lovely time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks so much for organizing this and inviting us to be here tonight.
Thank
you.
Really
great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.